Jordan Minter. I am the person here at the library who is in charge of the History Club. And we have History Club every month on the third Thursday at 3:30. So I see a lot of new people out there. So hopefully we'll see you again next month when we'll do the American Revolution and the U.S. Constitution, and we'll have a trivia game afterwards. Today, we are going to play vintage video games afterwards because our subject for this month is gaming history. We're celebrating 50 years of video games, and this is outside of my area of expertise, so I'm going to turn it over to our special guest today, Terrence Simpson.
Thank you.
Let's give him a hand.
So I'm Terrence Simpson, and as you can see, I'm a big video game geek. This is a hobby passion that has actually become a business. I own Level Gaming, and I have a business partner, and we started GT's Arcade and Grill, which is an arcade that we're trying to bring here to Sanford. So hopefully within the next year or so, you guys can see, my wife's doing this. Within the next year or so, we should be in a building somewhere here in Sanford. That's my personal goal, and that's what we're really pushing to do. I'd love to have something here to see all these faces come in and have a good time and enjoy the type of environment that I enjoyed whenever I was a kid. My wife and I, we grew up on the coast. We had the bowling alley and the skating rinks. We had piers. Almost any pizza place you went into had a Pac-Man in the back. So and even just in our homes and being teenagers and in our dating years and stuff, video games were always just a part of who we were. So I really want to bring that to y'all. So that's just a little blip on me and what I'm trying to do, and the hobby and the business that I own, or I co-own the arcade. So we're going to talk about the history of gaming, and I'm from vintage to modern. So at one point in time, this stuff wasn't vintage. At one point in time, none of us, the parents in the room, none of us were vintage. So we're vintage. I think anything that's over 10 years old you can consider, especially in this type of technology, in any type of technology. After 10 years, things seem ancient because technology is just one of those things that grows exponentially. So some of the topics we're going to cover, we're going to talk about the origins of gaming as entertainment. We're going to talk about how electronics entered into the realm of gaming, because humans being part of that, being a human is needing to entertain yourself. So gaming and games are not new by no means, but video gaming and electronics and how that all plays into how we entertain ourselves is, in the broad picture of things, a fairly new thing. We're going to talk about the early pioneers of video games, the rise and fall of arcades, because at one point in time, the only way you would enjoy some of the things that you guys are going to enjoy here in this room was in an arcade. And I have an arcade set up in another room. When we're done here, we can all go over here and check out some of those things. So at one point in time, you didn't have these in your home. You had to go to a separate place with a quarter in your hand, put it in a machine to play some of these things. So there was an era of arcades. Then we had the arcade brought into your home with what you see here, some of these vintage consoles. And then, so during that time, you had the Atari age, what I call the Atari age, where the Atari ruled the home. But then you had some contenders that come along. We're talking about Nintendo, Sega, Sony. Those companies started coming in and taking market share from that. And then you had what I consider to be the golden age. We'll talk about that. And the current state of video games, what we're experiencing now, and in fact, we'll finish up with what I believe to be the future of video games. So let's talk about some origins. When you look at these pictures here, these are very ancient forms of gaming. Some of these are immediately recognizable, right? If people in the room recognize what this is. What's this one up here in the corner?
Chess.
Yes. We've got what's down here?
Checkers.
Checkers. Awesome. So see, so these reach back so far back in history, but they still have a common thread that takes them from then till now, because some of the youngest people in the room know exactly what some of these games are. This one's a little bit more tricky. What's that one up in the right corner? Hello. So I'm very interested to know if anybody in the room can tell me what that one in the bottom corner is, because I didn't know until I started doing research for this.
Is it Mahjong?
Close. Mahjong is also very ancient. That one in the bottom corner, I had a good time learning about that one. It's actually what a lot of historians and archaeologists believe to be the oldest example of a board game. They found copies of boards in King Tutankhamun's tomb. It's often called the Game of Kings, and they had, one of the things I read about the copies they found in his tomb, all the pieces that were his were set to win. so it's good to be the king. So yeah, so from what I understand about this game is you would have your different pieces would have either white or black, and you would start in either this small corner here, and it's kind of like a racetrack that goes through the middle. You would roll one of these D4 dice. So unless they had made them, some of them were made out of stone, most of them were made out of bone, and they just didn't last. So we don't know a ton of stuff about the game. But we do know they used D4 dice. They would roll, and the whole point of the game was to race up the middle and get a piece off the board. But if you landed on your opponents, you could knock them off the board, and they would have to start all over again. So it's often called the Game of Kings. It's the rural game of Ur. Some of the oldest examples are, 4,500 years old or older. So I thought that was very interesting. The reason I bring that up is because in order for what you see to happen here, everything has to have a beginning. In order to have a Tesla today, you had to have a Model A. So, but they share common threads. They have wheels, they have steering wheels. Maybe one day cars won't have steering wheels. But so with a game has to be fun, right? It has to be something enjoyable. It has to stimulate your mind. And back then, that's what they had. That's the medium they had to be able to present a game. So I found this quote. I was digging for some quotes about video games. My wife kind of chuckled whenever I pulled it up, and I said, I've got to go with this one because who would like to read that quote for me? Anybody would like to read that? Go for it.
The worst thing a kid can say about homework is that it's too hard. The worst thing a kid can say about a video game is that it's too easy.
Very true. Very true. The parents in the room can relate, and I'm sure the kids can too. That came from a gentleman named Harry Jenkins, and he's a professor at UCLA. He does a lot of stuff on pop culture and music, movies, video games, that kind of thing. So technology. When did technology? We had that ancient board game. So you know that gaming has been around a very long time. When did technology, when did electronics? I mean, you see so many electronics in the room, a computer, there's TVs in the back, this board, our phones, it's all electronic technology. When did that and games really start mingling together? Well, the answer is in the beginning. When there was technology, somebody figured out how to make it into a game. It's just the way things are. So if you put really smart people with anything, they're going to figure out how to make it fun. And that in the 50s, a computer would take up a whole room. What you have here is way more than what it took to send people into the moon. I mean, this is literally a supercomputer in your hand. Back then, the computer would take up a whole room, but when you break down what a computer is, it's just a big calculator. It does advanced math. It's really quick. It's way faster than we can. And I put a picture of abacus in there because, everything has to have a beginning, right? So how do we calculate? We got the beginning, and in about the 50s, we had whole rooms full of these big calculators crunching numbers. In October 1958, a physicist named William Higginbottom created what is thought to be the first video game. It was a very simple tennis game. Now, before I even play this video, one of my little, what's your favorite video game? Do you have one? Something you really love to play? Minecraft. Okay, that's very ironic because I brought Minecraft to talk about. But there's no wrong answer. That's an awesome game. I love that game. So before there was Minecraft, before you could even have Minecraft, can you imagine playing something like this? Anybody played tennis before? You hit a ball and it has to go over a net and then you have to send it back to the other player. So this guy actually was a nuclear physicist and was part of making the nuclear bomb. And he figured out how to take one of his oscilloscopes, which is a very complicated electronic piece of equipment, probably cost a lot of money back then, and said, how do I put tennis on this thing? And made a game for him and his buddies to play. And when this came out, it blew people's minds. Like whenever he was showing this to his closed circle of people, they just couldn't believe what they were seeing. Compare that to today's standards in Minecraft. Some of your very favorite games you're playing right now. So he started the ball rolling based on that same thing, a ball of light traveling across the screen, and how do we manipulate it, how do we make it fun. By 1962, college kids, I believe it was MIT, had started coming up with how do you improve. If somebody makes something, there's always somebody that's going to say, how do I improve it? And they started, well, let's have its own dedicated screen, and they started a game. By 1962, they had Space Wars that was floating around colleges and other professional institutions. And with that game, you had a star in the middle, and you had the gravity. The star was pulling these little ships towards it, and if you got to the middle, you blew up. Your whole point was to shoot the other guy before the star sucked you in. So there you go. Brainy people taking complicated computer equipment and making it into a game. But you still just had a ball of light on a screen, shooting at another ball of light on the screen. So the brains, so how do you have any kind of depth? And at that time, with the computing power, when I say depth, how do you have a story? How do you have a world that you can imagine in your mind? Like when you're reading a book and you can see what you're reading in your mind's eye and just have an adventure. The only way they could really accomplish that with that technology was text-based games. So they would take, it's like reading a book that you could interact with. You type in what you wanted to do, and the computer would think and give you a result, and you had something you could interact with as a game. Brainy people, what do they want to do? They make a game about landing on the moon, one of the most complicated things, math and trajectory and everything. So, but that was the type of people that were making games. So this was very fun and entertaining to them. And you know, depending on who you are, you might think that's really fun and entertaining. By 1969, pop culture starts coming in. Star Trek, you got a geeky community. I consider myself a geek, so I have things I'm into that other people were into. Within that geeky community, one of the big things was Star Trek, the original Star Trek. So they took that popular culture thing and turned it into a game. And so now you have kind of an example of, you have a world that they created that was text-based based on a TV show that was very popular at the time. Here's where you have the them versus us. I consider me an us person. I'm your average Joe. With the thems were the college students, the professionals. They were in these mainframe computers that were very expensive and very experimental, and normal people just didn't have access to it. It was a very closed group of people that had access to this stuff. But your average household during that time, they had a TV, maybe one in the whole room. Can y'all remember? Can y'all imagine not having a TV? Like your whole lives you've had TV. So they didn't have that. They had a radio to listen to and a TV, and that was the extent of their technology and their entertainment. So whenever there's a them and us, there's also a problem and a solution, right? Every problem there's a solution. What was the problem? The problem is the masses, if they even knew that a video game existed, let's say they sent their kid off to college and he come back home on Thanksgiving and he said, I played this awesome game called Space War when I was in college. They had no way of knowing what he was talking about. Like, okay, so you're in college to learn how to send stuff into space and you're playing games. You know, so they didn't understand at all. If they had any knowledge of a video game, they had no way of experiencing it. So that's the problem. What was the solution? The solution was, let's make games available to everybody. So enter the 70s. You had these college kids. I'm going to go over some of these names. Nolan Bushnell, the creator of Atari. He came in and said, how do I take this complicated thing and make it like appealing, make it attractive, and make it where people can have access to it. And then the thing I enjoy, other people can enjoy. Because that's the whole point. If I enjoy this stuff, I want y'all to enjoy this stuff. So how do they make that happen? They create the early arcade machines. So we have Nolan Bushnell, 1971, he created a game called Computer Space. It's based on that early game I was telling you about, Space Wars, because he played it in college and he wanted other people to have a chance to play it. Al Alcorn in 1972 created Pong. Pong, who can describe Pong to me? I want somebody to describe Pong, right?
Two like light rectangles and one ball. It's like the tennis game that you described earlier, but simpler for the human mind.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. You got two paddles on either side. Everybody's played table tennis, right? You hit a ball, the other person hits the ball, and you hit it, it's got to go over a net and bounce back. So they created that in digital form, and it was like wildfire. It was so simple, so easy, so fun, and people loved it. So Computer Space, kind of technical, a little complicated, people weren't having fun with it, but it's the beginning. Pong brought that type of entertainment to the masses. By the late 70s, the Japanese had entered the picture full swing, and they were cranking out hits, and they were taking this technology, because video gaming and the video game industry is an American-made, American-born industry. Started with Atari, so in California. But by the time the late 70s, the Japanese took and run with it, and they've contributed so much to the video game industry, in some areas taking over the video game industry, and in the gaming world, we're better for it. So by 1979, Asteroids was coming out, and Lyle Rhines was behind that. Out of this whole picture of a whole decade of video gaming, these three guys all rolled into Atari, and Atari was the king of the 70s. I mean, they ruled the roost. They had it going on in arcades. They brought the home console to the market. I mean, they were knocking it out of the park. My first earliest memories of gaming, and I talked to one of the parents in the room, was on the Atari 2600, which was all made possible by those three guys. So by the time the end of the 70s and 80s rolled around, arcades started coming around in full swing, and now you had a whole industry based around video gaming. You had a lot of minds going into this form of entertainment, and like I said, it's making a lot of money. A lot of people are involved. More money, things get progressed, get better. I put some old games across the top, and then some newer arcade games, and I've got two slides of these. So can somebody tell me what that one is?
Space Invaders.
Space Invaders. What about the one in the middle?
Defender.
One of my all-time favorite.
Defender.
Defender.
Street Fighter.
So good. Street Fighter. I heard one of the younger ones say Street Fighter in the middle. That took the video game industry by storm in the 90s.
Fighting games are one of the most popular franchises.
They are, and we'll talk about that in a minute, because that actually had some repercussions later on, because the governor got involved, and we'll see where that goes. So, what about this guy?
Pac-Man.
I love it. I love hearing the young voices, because because Miss Pac-Man, and especially Miss Pac-Man, really was the everyman child and woman's. I mean, it was a game that anybody could play, and everybody loved it. The colors were great. The theme of the game was great. It was easy for anybody to pick up. Y'all could play it, I could play it, anybody could play it, and that really changed the world right there. So we got sports starts entering the picture. We got NBA Jam in the bottom corner, and then like the young man with the Star Wars shirt was talking about, fighting games started taking over and grabbed a huge market share.
Oh, Donkey Kong. That was the first appearance of Mario in a video game ever.
It was.
You might have stolen his thunder.
You want to go?
My bad.
He's wearing a Mario shirt.
So Schweitzer already called it. We had Donkey Kong. Okay, so fun fact about Donkey Kong. What if I was to talk about a donkey and describe a donkey? What's one of the main things about a donkey? Is it easygoing or is it stubborn? They're stubborn. The ornery, right? Kong, what was the big gorilla Kong? He was a gorilla, right?
Right.
So that's how we got, why would you call a game Donkey Kong? Because from what I understand, one of the easiest translations when this was being created by Nintendo, and it's Japanese, you had stubborn monkey. That don't make a very good video game, So from what I understand, they tried to do some translation and threw some stuff around the room, like let's see how this is going to work and translating it to the American market, and Donkey Kong stuck. So you got a stubborn monkey. We've got Centipede, which I actually have if anybody's interested in going to the arcade after this. I got Centipede, I got an original in there. I also have an original Pac-Man in there. Asteroids. I heard somebody already talk about Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, and then we had racing games. By this time, we're getting in the 2000s, the early 2000s. Racing sims and simulation, they were able to do so much inside of those consoles, but it was the end of the life of arcades. This is really what started translating big into some of the home consoles, but before the home console, if you were going to sit in an arcade machine with a real steering wheel and a gas and a brake and race down the road on NASCAR, you had to do it in an arcade. And Sega was the king of the hill with that. So you had racing sims that start entering the picture. Now, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, he brought it up earlier. You can see a trend in some of the games. We have very, very simple games that don't really ruffle a whole lot of feathers. You start putting Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat into the mix, and there's no regulation. So your parents might say, I mean, I've told my kids what I don't want them to play and what I'm not comfortable with them playing. Parents were going through the same thing during this era, and they might drop them off at an arcade and they can play this, and they can play this in the same room. And so it started bringing us some concerns. People were worried about that, and then that's how you get the ratings on the bottom of a video game and what's acceptable for certain ages. The government got involved and said, hey, we have to regulate this. If you're going to make something and do the kind of things that were being done in this video game, there has to be some type of warning, because maybe the average parent doesn't know what that game is. They just, a video game is a video game to them. So they don't know the difference between that one and that one. So that's how the rating system in video games even came about. It's because of fighting games. So once again, going back to arcades, the arcade boom and bust. Arcade getting their start in the 70s, being in complete decline by the 90s. At the height of arcade, it's really hard to pull some of these numbers. I got on and started doing some research, but from what I understand, in the height of the arcade era, there were at least 25,000 dedicated arcades. That's a whole building, and all it is a place to play games. And that's what they were reporting on their taxes. That's what they came to be. They were in an arcade. That you can't even count the places: pizza parlors, restaurants. What do we have when we were growing up? We had the bowling alleys and the skating rinks. We had the piers. My wife and I grew up on the coast, so we had 2 piers that had video games. So you can't even count those. These numbers are even hard to even rein in because it was so prolific. so many of them. You had 25,000 arcades, at least a million and a half machines in those arcades. You had 200 kids, adults, everything in between, going through those a week, which equals lots of money. 260 million players a year going through those things at their peak. That's nothing to sneeze at. This was a big business. So that equals out to $900 million at the peak a year was flying through these things. 3.6 billion quarters. I don't even know what would that fill this room? I don't know. I don't know what 3.6 billion quarters looks like. Which guy?
Is that in today's money or that?
No, that's that money. I haven't
inflation,
adjusted.
that's going to be a couple $1 billion.
I don't know. I didn't do the math on inflation on that. But yes, it's a lot of money then, it's a lot of money now. So, so basically, when you start throwing money around like that, people start paying attention. But by the 90s, by 98, so I was 18 years old. By the time I was 18 years old, they say that stuff was declining, but I played arcade. We played arcades past that because there were always places hanging on. There was always somewhere that had something that you could play. So, until those places completely burned down or went out of business or got sold, there were still games there to play. But those numbers I was showing you earlier, by 1998, they were on their way out. Why do you think that was? Somebody tell me why. Oh,
Actually, I'll let someone else.
yeah. Tell me why.
Maybe because they started like the home console.
That's exactly correct. So these home consoles, you'll see when we go back here and you guys get a chance to play the Ataris. They were nice and cool. You could have them in your house, but you couldn't compare the way they looked to what was in an arcade. But that was fast. The home consoles were fast catching up. And by the late 90s, what you could have in your home either was the same or better than what you could play in an arcade. When that happened, people would rather just stay home. In the 70s, the Atari came out, the Atari 2600, which is this one down here on the end, came out. It's $195. By the 80s, the Nintendo, which I have in the back playing with Mario, on there, it came out, it was $100. And by the 90s, the PlayStation, the original PlayStation had come out and it was $300. This young man out here used inflation, the word inflation, which means money back then, don't mean what it does mean. Everything gets more expensive, right? The cost of living. So, adjusted for inflation in today's standards, that's what we're looking at. So that guy right over there would have cost, if you bought it new, which my father I don't believe he paid new for that. I wouldn't know the difference, but I think he probably had a good console or something. $850. But what's a PlayStation 5 cost, my young, or parents might know.
These days, the Switch would cost like $300.
Yeah, so you're comparing the Nintendo to the modern day Switch. You've got PlayStation 5s, I think the latest thing out right now is around $700-800. And you hit the stuff right in the middle. PlayStation was $585 when it came out. So, Joe, we're still right in the same ballpark. These companies are still making the same amount of money on us now as they were then. We talk about Atari for a little bit here. I call it the Atari age. It was a time whenever this man right here, Nolan Bushnell, I showed you a picture of him earlier. This was the king of the castle. This guy started it all. He started it in 1972 with $500 and a friend. And I do remember reading some stories about him forcing like one of his daughters to stay in the bedroom with another daughter so he'd have a place in his house for an office. So dad comes in and says, hey, y'all are going to have to stay over here together for a little bit. I got to start this business. So they're like, thanks, Dad. Well, later on, they're like, thanks, Dad. Because in a very, very short period of time, he took this thing and ran with it and turned it into what it is, and he sold it. So how many years difference? That's 72 to 76. 4 years, right? So in 4 years difference, he sold it for $28 million, which is $168 million. That's a pretty good investment been there 4 years, I think. So some people really not good. So he stayed on with the company, but he sold the company, and he was no longer the owner of the company. He stayed on and still was a part of the company. He went on to create another company called Chuck E. Cheese. Whenever he left Atari. Yeah. Because while he was in college, he worked in arcades, and he worked in amusement parks. And he knew, he could see the value of entertainment and how much money can be made in keeping people entertained. So, he also knew how to. When Nintendo come around in 1983, now Nintendo is a very, very old company. They were actually started in 1889. They made playing cards and gaming tiles and things like that. So they did games for a very, very long time. But this man, Mr. Hiroshi Yamaguchi, was the brains behind the success in the 80s. He said, if the Americans are making so much money doing this, and we can do better, we're going to do it. And we're going to beat this. It's very competitive. So if this is what we're doing, we're going to beat it. There was a video game crash in the late 70s where Atari's success caught up with it, and they really started putting out some stinkers. Some of these games just were no good, and they were flooding the market with all this no good stuff. Parents were tired of paying for it, and the video game crash happened. One of those games, actually I have a copy of, and CT. I do have a copy of CT. This one ended up in a hole in the desert somewhere. So, this game was corporate bigwigs and big brains saying, you know what, we got to ride on the success of a movie franchise. You got this much time to do it, which was not enough time to make a good game. They rushed it to market, and this game is it's said that this is the end of the Atari age. This game ruined it all. It was so bad they buried it in a hole in the ground in the desert, denied it for decades.
I wouldn't be surprised if someone actually went and
They did.
They did?
They did.
Oh.
Because Atari lied about it and said that didn't happen, and then somebody wanted to prove it did, and they went and dug the holes up and found the game. Games, old mini, like just copies of it buried in a hole. That's how bad it was. So Nintendo come along and saved us, because that could have been the end of it. There would have been no more money put in it. There would have been development of it. Nintendo come along and said we can do much better. They introduced the Nintendo, and with Nintendo, one of the most popular video game characters ever, which I have on my shirt, which is Mario. And I'm going to show you guys what me, as y'all's age, would have seen on TVs during that time.
May you be the one to witness the birth of the incredible Nintendo Entertainment System, the one to play with Rob, the extraordinary video robot, batteries not included. He helps you tackle even the toughest challenge. Will you be the first to raise the incredibly accurate Zephyr and play games like Duck Hunt, or Action Pack, Hogan's Alley, and High Flying Kung Fu, each sold separately? Will you be the one to experience the Nintendo Entertainment System? It comes with Rob, Zephyr, Control Deck, 2 controllers, Gyro Mic, and Duck Hunt.
That's honestly more convincing than commercials.
Right. So these I've rescued. These were part, somebody had threw a whole bunch of this stuff away, and I rescued it. I'm going to let some of you guys play with one of these. Just see what you think about if you had to play this thing for more than an hour. What do you think your hand would feel like?
I mean, it would hurt.
Compare that to, let's say, what I consider to be the evolution and where we're at now. That would be the Model T. This would be the Tesla. This is an Xbox 360 controller, which just, I use these things for everything. So they're just so ergonomic, but all the modern consoles have very good controls. So you just compare that little box with 2 buttons that wears big calluses on your hands when you play it for hours at a time, to this that you can play all you want and never hurt your hand. So Nintendo come along, they saved the day, they brought back the games. I put Sega in here as an honorable mention. I'm running out of time. I'm probably already out of time. But so Sega come along, they were a competitor. That's where you have Sonic entered the scene. and they almost took Nintendo, they caught them by surprise, and they almost became the next big thing that would beat Nintendo, but by 2001 they were already out of the game. Sony come along, they created the PlayStation, the original PlayStation. I have a copy of it back there, set up for people to play. Sony and Nintendo, PlayStation, I'll throw this fact in there, they actually were cooperating to create a system. It was the Nintendo PlayStation. Nintendo went to Sony because Sony was in the game, in the electronics business, and they made a lot of things that use CDs. They wanted games to be on CDs next, and go out of being in cartridges to being on CDs. Sony had experience with it. They're like, hey guys, we want you to make this game. They collaborated. About halfway through the collaboration, Nintendo pulled out and said, no, I think we're going to stay with cartridges. They created the Nintendo 64, which was still a cartridge-based system. Sony was like, okay, we'll do our own thing. They created the Sony PlayStation with the technology and all they were already working on with Nintendo, and they didn't even change the colors. When you go back there and look at original PlayStation, the colors on the shelf are the same colors that are Super Nintendo. Because they didn't change the plastic molds. They didn't change anything about it. They just put their name on it, Sony, and rolled with it, and won. I mean, Sony almost put Nintendo down in those early days because they were selling so many of them. This is almost like a fight, right? It sounds like you're really competing. It's a competition, it's a game to win. So, Microsoft not being anybody to be one-upped, entered the market in 2000. They had already dominated in PCs. And so Mr. Bill Gates said, hey guys, this is a lot of money we're missing out on. How do we enter this market? And they came out with the original Xbox. So by the end of the early 2000s, between 2000 and 2010, what we have today is set. I call it the big three. We got Nintendo, we got PlayStation, we got Xbox. So with this big race that everybody's been in to take this market and to bring video games to everybody, we got three contenders that are still in it. And the oldest one being Nintendo.
And then you've got PC just crushing all of them.
And PC, that's a whole, I didn't even put PC in here because I could do 2 hours on PC. So we're only PC out of this one for today. So today the industry is worth $300 billion, which passes both movies and music. So film and music are both making less money than games now. So what is that impact on pop culture? So we had these brains, computer geeks, physicists, they were in institutes creating this stuff, but now it's in the hearts and minds of millions of everybody. Somebody tell me who this person is.
Pac-Man.
This is a test. This is my pop culture test.
Okay.
So everybody in the room knew who that was, from the youngest to the oldest.
Mario.
At one point in time, I read a study that Mario was more recognizable around the world than Mickey Mouse.
What? Seriously?
I mean, I believe that in places like Japan and some of those Middle Eastern Asian countries.
Yeah.
But in here, everyone knows what Mickey Mouse is, even toddlers, and they also probably know who Mario is. But
Well, the reason being is because Mario is international, and there were still some places that had not seen Mickey Mouse. So Mario was everywhere.
That's possible?
Yep. Now this is reaching a little bit. So
Okay.
who's that?
Crash Bandicoot. Hey, Mom.
A crazy fox with a crazy hairdo?
So what the early systems did really well, Nintendo did really well, was create a mascot, and they did that with Mario. Arcades, Pac-Man's has always been associated with games. PlayStation tried with this guy, but they really kind of dropped the mascot thing and just started making a lot of games.
Crash Bandicoot was cool, though.
Sonic.
So that's very interesting that y'all know who Sonic is, and that company went out and quit making mainstream consoles in 2001. But that character is still very popular. They made movies. Last year was the second movie today. So they're still making movies. Sega is still making money off this guy, and he's been around since the
They're making
90s.
movies and games. Did you hear that they're about to make another one?
Hey,
John 117.
So,
I'm an Xbox player. I definitely know who that name is.
yeah, so Xbox, but you can see, guys, you can see a progression of kind of like we have this first character that was bouncing around little screens back in the day, and then now we got something like this. So everything evolves, and now you have whole stories. This stuff to me is whole new worlds just being created in the electronic world. There's just whole worlds to experience in this stuff. I bet everybody in this room could take a quick look at this chart, and you can probably pick your first video game you ever had. I've already told y'all the Atari 2600 was my first one. My fondest memories is of the Nintendo, and then I do still play a lot of the stuff through the 6th generation to today. Can y'all, somebody tell me what was their first one they had on there?
My first was the Xbox 360, and then I got a Xbox One. Then I got a Nintendo Switch, and then I got a VR headset.
Nice. I saw your name go into that. The Nintendo Switch.
They came out with these handheld little games too before the Atari, the second generation of it.
Yeah.
Because I remember I had a handheld like football game. It was it was just a sequence. If you learn the right sequence, you could just run the ball. You know? And they had a basketball one. It was like a size of a transistor radio.
Do you remember what it was called? Was it Game & Watch? Was it called?
No, it wasn't a game. It was about the size of a transistor radio, if you remember those.
Yeah.
And
I think it was just called football.
yeah, it was. I think it was just football, but it was just you got like 3 dots for the line and one guy in the back, and you try to get him around and stuff. But it was like this thing you could take with you, put battery in it and play it anywhere. But
So from our young,
I'll have to look that one up. Yeah.
what was your first?
The GameCube.
The GameCube. What an awesome.
Love the GameCube.
So,
What's the GameCube?
I want you guys to think with me for a second. Our youngest one is giving us examples of the memories they're making now. Some of our older folks like me can give you memories that they made decades ago when they were that age. It's going to hit everybody in this room. There's something on here for everybody, even in the middle. So that is what we call nostalgia.
On the medical field, they came out with this condition called Nintendo Thumb. Did you ever hear that?
Yeah. Like a
And people didn't know what it was, because they be coming in with these, and they said, "You play Nintendo? Yeah, we got Nintendo Thumb."
Did you see the little controller I passed around?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's.
And then, like when the first Xbox came out, it came out with the original Halo and this flying game. And I like the flying games. My son was about 3 or 4 when we got it, and Halo sat in the corner for like a year. And then he said, "Hey Dad, let's play this game." And that was the end. we went on that, played that thing forever. And Donkey Kong.
So
That and Donkey Kong.
proves another point that it doesn't matter no matter how old you are, how young you are, there's something for everybody.
Yeah, he's
When it
now-
comes to video games, there's something for
He's
everybody.
now 30 years old, and if we get together, we'll play Halo. We'll play it on the hardest level, but we'll play co-op. So like I was like, "Dad, go over here to kill, and I'll be over here," and then you would spawn and all this other stuff.
I'm gonna ask my wife what's something we've played so much of as the whole family. The whole family in one room.
Guitar Hero.
Guitar Hero. We got stuck as a family on Guitar Hero, and we played it. My kids, us, we still play it. So I was tempted to bring it in, but I didn't.
Another one too in the arcades. They still have them there. What they still have, I've seen now, is the dance. My son used to do that
Dance.
with his friend.
Dance Dance Revolution.
It's like exercise. The one.
Oh yeah. So I'm gonna wrap this thing up, guys. I'm way over. With video games being firmly set in the fabric of modern society, I've very well demonstrated that with these little exercises I've done. What is the future of gaming? And I've already heard it once, what my personal opinion is, because if you think about it, where we're at now, graphics in these things, what they're able to accomplish in there's sometimes I see some of these new games that have come out that I can't tell the difference between that and watching a real football game, watching a real movie. It's just so close. To me, and personally, I think the future is virtual reality. So standing here now, looking forward to this is what I see people doing in the future. We're already here. There's VR sets. I'm unfortunately one of those people we were talking about earlier. I get kind of seasick and dizzy and a little bit of a headache with it. I really, really want to enjoy it. But where we're at now with it, I'm just one of those people that I just really can't enjoy VR right now, but I'm very excited about where it's going and what we can do. Because I believe as long as I'm on this planet, I'll be playing video games. So I just want to see as much of it as I can and see where it goes. So in here, guys, video games were invented in the 50s. They had, by the 60s, they had captivated young college minds. They went mainstream in the 70s with arcades. They flooded the home with the Nintendo in the 80s. By the 90s, what you could do in your home has surpassed what you could do in an arcade. By the 2000s, we had the three winners, what I call the three winners in that race. Talk about Xbox, Nintendo, and PlayStation. We had, by the 10s, everybody had some type of video game in their life and in their home. I mean, it's just like there was a time before there were cars and people rode horses, but nobody's alive like now that probably remembers that. So there's a time now, there's a time coming where everybody that's on this planet played some type of video game as a kid. And it's amongst the largest entertainment industry. Right now, today, 2022, they're making more money hands over fist than anything else out there. So the future is very bright for video games. I appreciate y'all. Thank you guys so much for taking part in this. I apologize for going over, guys.
No
Thank you guys
worries.
for having me. And any question y'all have, I'm going to be here. However long until they kick us out. And if you guys want to now, if you want to, I'm taking a look at all the stuff I have set up. If you want to sit down and play something, feel free. And then if anybody wants to go see the arcade, I have that too. So.
All right, thank you so much.